Rochester Today with Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Good morning. It's Rochester Today, Tuesday, and that means Tom Ostrom's here. I'm Andy Brownell. Good morning, Tom.
Morning, Andy.
Not wearing my purple shirt today, but yeah, it was pretty nice to be nice to be a Vikings fan on Sunday.
Your shirt looks purple to me.
It's dark blue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 42 points? My God, that's getting up to be a basketball score.
Yeah, and it, I enjoyed Kirk Cousins when he was our quarterback. But I'll be honest, I wasn't sad to see him go.
Yeah.
With the amount of money that he left for, it was, I don't know. I don't want to say revenge, sweet revenge, but it certainly was. It felt good because he went away for a ton of money, and it's going to work out well for him and his family. He's going to make $100 million whether or not he plays.
Jeez.
So he won the lottery in that way, and I guess I'm happy for him that way. If somebody was willing to pay him that kind of money, the performance by Sam Darnold certainly put him to shame this season. But I am under no illusion Darnold will be gone next season. He performed so well, he pretty much guaranteed himself a long-term contract worth a ton of money with somebody next year. And the Vikings, I'm sure, are not interested in a long-term contract with their rookie quarterback waiting in the wings.
Okay.
So,
well, Aaron Rodgers left Green Bay over fussing over the new quarterback they have now. He didn't like it that they brought him on board. Then he went to the Jets, and he's not doing well.
No, he's not. I think it's time for Mr. Rodgers to retire. He does not look like he is having any fun at all. No. All right. Well, what's in the mailbag today, Tom?
Babylon Bee satire. In a last-ditch attempt to prevent Trump from taking office, Democrats are contemplating how they can start World War III.
Oh, gosh.
and then Branko shows Hunter standing in front of his dad. Gee, Dad, thanks for the pardon. And Biden says, don't mention it, son, as Biden is standing in front of a bag of money, 10% for the big guy.
Oh, gosh.
He pardoned himself, too.
On both of those issues, read interesting opinion pieces over the weekend on, starting World War III is nothing to joke about. But apparently there are some, especially progressive Democrats, very angry with Biden because he is, quote unquote, letting Donald Trump steal center stage, even though he's not president yet.
Yeah.
As in exerting influence over international policy, meeting with Macron, meeting with the Mexican president, and I guess highlighting his future foreign policy initiatives even before he takes office. So there's apparently a lot of anger at Biden over that. And then on the pardon front, there's talk, especially among progressive Democrats, of trying to push Biden into issuing preemptive pardons for a bunch of people who are current and former members of administration for misdeeds that have yet to be defined, which is pretty worrisome.
Well, they either know that there have been misdeeds, so he's doing it, or they're doing it to stop Trump from going after them. But I don't know how they can get away with that legally, and it's pathetic.
Well, either way, it's for a party that campaigned on its desire to save our democracy. Those moves would be anti-democratic, to say the least, that you would issue a blanket pardon excuse, alleged misdeeds by members of your administration as you leave office. So it would make it impossible to hold anybody accountable if they did commit. It's a big question. Did they?
And they're going after Trump. They're trying to stop Trump from going after them to protect them.
Yeah, well, it hasn't happened. There's really been no indication that Biden would actually do it, but he is being urged to do it, apparently.
Well, you don't know with that guy. And then Branko also, Patel, the new FBI nominee, shows him with a big searchlight at the FBI headquarters, putting a light on the cockroaches. So good. And then from Criticus, you can't make this stuff up. The plan was utter nonsense, highly racist. Education is corrupt and off the rails. San Francisco is just regrettable. And it relates to something I brought up a while back, how colleges in California, with their wokeism, Asian students perform well per capita, high scores, and we're getting into the best colleges. And a year or so ago, California tried to stop that and blocked Asians from entering these colleges and put minority students who scored much lower in the colleges. And Criticus sends this article in San Francisco, $30,000 equity-centered school closure plans. They were going to close some schools that Asians were being accepted into in public schools, and parents had an uproar over it, especially Asian parents, because they were targeting high-performing majority Asian schools, and Asian parents are furious that the Asians were being excluded and discriminated against in favor of low-scoring minorities, and San Francisco's plan has been put on hold with apparent uproar, and superintendent had to resign, and the person that's in charge of equity is under the gun. So it's just political correctness ruining education in California.
Well, it's ironic to use the term equity when you would target one minority group over another minority group. That's the opposite of equity, isn't it?
Sure. That's right. I guess equal opportunity is what they would call equity in their left-wing plans, but it didn't work, and parents were in an uproar, and a superintendent had to resign.
I would say opposite of economic or equal opportunity. It would be pushing. I mean, the opportunity view would be, here is this, and it's up to you to qualify and excel to achieve that. Everybody has the same opportunity.
Right.
It's a long-winded argument.
It is. Then this from Gil Gutnick. He sent this along, wishing us a Merry Christmas. And he said, Tom, he said, 2024 will be left to history, dominated by American elections. The early debate between President Trump and President Biden was a disaster. Vice President Harris came with great enthusiasm, but looked weak and unprepared. Trump looks strong and confident. In fact, I'll add this: Trump was in Europe to celebrate the cathedral that had been burned down.
Notre Dame, yeah.
Notre Dame. And while he was there, leading European political leaders were gathering around him, coming to shake his hand. He was the hero of the event.
Persona non grata to the fate of the party.
That's right, going along with Biden in the background. And then Gil said Governor Walz brought little effort to the Democratic ticket. His knuckleheaded misstatements were troublesome, and Trump's comeback victory was historic. And he's got opportunities and support before him, even now from Democrats. The people who bet against Trump were defeated, and Trump is on his way to his mission. That's the mailbag.
Okay. We'll take a break. And Merry Christmas, Gil, by the way. Take our break. Back in a moment with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, Rochester Today at News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9.
Paul Trombley.
Rochester Today with Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
Welcome back, everybody. More Rochester Today, Tuesday with Tom Ostrom. All right, Tom, state news. Where do you want to start?
Let's see, from the Gateway Pundit, an ex-Ivy League student has been identified as a person of interest and been arrested in the fatal shooting of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. A McDonald's employee in Pennsylvania spotted the guy. I'm amazed at all the photographs of security camera photographs that were released to the public about this guy, and they zeroed in on him, and the McDonald's employee spotted him at the restaurant, and police came and arrested him, and he had documents that showed his anger at the healthcare industry, and he had the weapon that they had in the photographs that was used, and then they seemed to have him in custody, but the security cameras that had him from different sources and even inside a cab. I don't know
Everywhere.
how the police gathered all that so fast, but they did. And
I've been told if you go in, Tom, into even our local dispatch center, it looks like you are in the Situation Room at the White House with all the 911 dispatchers and the various cameras that they have available aimed in public places around the community, whether they be at intersections or in front of buildings. It's quite amazing. And then all these homes, including mine, that have doorbell cameras. People can voluntarily offer them to law enforcement that can contain valuable information.
Law enforcement zeroed in from different sources very rapidly. And so the employee saw this man and recognized his eyebrows. Luigi Mangione, a Ivy League student and a valedictorian. He was very bright, and is very bright. And the police apprehended him. He had a handgun with the silencer in his pants, and they've got his online activities from a thrown away cell phone burner kind of thing. And the crime scene is significant, and they've got the goods on him already.
Thank goodness. I hope that they have got the guy. It certainly seems like the evidence that has been discussed, not officially, but through people who are familiar with the situation, as they always say, seems pretty strong. But what is most disturbing to me about what happened to Mr. Thompson, Minnesota guy, obviously, United Healthcare based in the Twin Cities. He lived in, I think, Maple Grove, is this outpouring of sympathy and support for the killer, even before he was identified online by, trolls, I guess you'd call them. They actually had people holding a gathering celebration dressed up in the same sort of hoodie and backpack and thing in New York with the purported purpose of trying to confuse investigators by throwing a bunch of lookalikes out there on the streets so that they would waste their time tracking it's horrifying. And okay, I understand animosity towards any player in the healthcare industry today. It's become so expensive, so complicated, and difficult to maneuver compared to what it was 20, 25 years ago. The insurance companies have their role in this, but to blame them exclusively is ridiculous. They are institutions designed to make profit for shareholders while offering a service at a competitive price. They are at the whim of the federal government and the healthcare providers as far as pricing is concerned in a lot of ways. You can argue that some insurance companies might make excessive profits, and you can argue that healthcare providers charge too much, but it's a super complicated mix of issues here that many of them are directly related to and caused by government policy, specifically Obamacare. And perhaps what might come of this awful tragedy of Mr. Thompson being gunned down in the streets of New York City is the spotlight being shown on the failings of Obamacare and the consequences of that policy from the federal government that many experts warned at the very beginning would be the result of this government intervention into the marketplace. We have a hybrid government healthcare system right now. Almost 40%. Actually, I believe if you put in the military people who have their TRICARE system, I think it's getting close to 50% of Americans receive their health care coverage through the government, which puts all sorts of weird distortions on the healthcare marketplace for the rest of us who are dealing with the private health marketplace. And that means huge premiums, huge deductibles, and difficulties for the average person in obtaining healthcare.
And a security expert who was a bodyguard for the CEO is astonished that he didn't have security in New York City.
I guess he was a relatively low-key guy who didn't attract a lot of attention.
But he'd been suffering a lot of threats. They knew that too.
That's true.
So, and then former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin, the George Floyd event, has hired a new attorney and asked for convictions to be overturned. This attorney's going to do it because more evidence was found about George Floyd's health, including a very obvious heart attack cause with a medical issue that I can't even pronounce.
It's a tumor that can sometimes be connected to cardiac events, but whether or not they can prove that is a whole other matter.
Well, a medical examiner said it was George Floyd killed himself, and they took him off the case very early and threatened his career. So Chauvin's going to try again with a new lawyer. And the Center for the American Experiment is suing the Minnesota Department of Education for records on the wokeism and the let's say nefarious activities to invoke leftist ideology in the curriculum. And the Center for the American Experiment is suing the Department of Education to get records of who did what, when, what was their plan, what did they cover up, what were their intentions. We'll see where that goes.
Yep. They're accused of slow walking the documents, as the favorite lexicon has been out in Washington, D.C., right?
Yep, that's right. And then very complicated, but the city council in the Twin Cities in Minneapolis tried to override Minneapolis Mayor Frey's veto of a proposed labor standard board that is very complex. Frey was in favor of it before, but now he's against it because of some complexities and some repercussions. Anyway, the city council tried to override Frey's veto of the labor standards board policy, and they failed to do it. So Frey is ahead of the game right now.
Well, that's my opinion. That would have made the business climate in our state's largest city very antagonistic for business owners, current business owners, and I think it would probably dissuade many from ever opening shop in Minneapolis. It would have been very harmful to Minneapolis's economy based upon the makeup of the board and what I understand their mission was to be. All right. Time to take a break for news already, I guess.
Okay.
We have lots to talk about. We will get right back at it after this quick news break. Rochester Today will return with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell on News Talk 1340 KROC.
FM.
Good morning. Welcome back. Tuesday on Rochester Today with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell. And Tom, time to start talking about national news items. Where do you want to start?
Well, Breitbart did a study of sheriffs in red states and in red jurisdictions support Trump and his deportation plan. Sheriffs in sanctuary city areas and blue state areas don't. But the federal government can call on local police and deputize them to help with immigration policy. And that's what the sheriffs are going to do. We're going to help Trump deport these especially criminal aliens. We support them 100%. And the Illegal Immigration Reform and Immigration Responsibility Act allows the federal government to garner local police support in their mission. And local sheriffs have expressed support for the deportation with the crime elements and the costs and everything else. But sanctuary city area county sheriffs said they won't ask citizens about immigration status, and they won't help the ICE do their deportation. But Texas is offering land that will set up custody centers to put these people who are going to be deported in them, and help Trump with his deportation plans. And Governor Abbott of Texas is behind all this and putting in place. So the courts also have allowed concertina wire and even the floats in the rivers to stop immigrants, and Texas is on top of all that.
It's interesting to note that at the same time all this is happening, President-elect Trump has hinted that he is open to negotiations with Congress and the Democrats specifically on some sort of measure to address the so-called dreamers, the children who were born here from parents who came here illegally and are undocumented and are caught in the middle of all this, I guess. They had no choice as to whether or not they would be born here and their status being unclear. So while the push is on for an aggressive deportation policy, it's also being balanced, on the other hand, with the potential for some sort of legislative relief for some immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who knows how that'll go down? I have no clue.
That Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican of Georgia, she says if the House Speaker doesn't want to release the Matt Gaetz ethical issues that he's been challenged by, and some Democrats and Republicans do want to release all that. So Greene, as usual, is on the warpath. And she said, if they're going to release that, we're going to release the ethics reports, because some Republicans have been sanctioned and their records have kept closed and they've paid money to keep them closed. We'll release those, and we'll try to look at some of the issues that some of them have that they've been protected from. So that goes on.
I bet none of it happens. I think there's a lot of people on both sides of the political aisle who would like their problems swept under the rug. Yeah, that's right. And Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, he says the federal government is withholding information about the gain of function biological research that Dr. Fauci denied, and they're withholding documents on COVID origins, and Rand Paul wants those things released, and he's not getting cooperation. And and Dr. Fauci is one of these people that Biden is thinking of giving a preemptive pardon to, because of many controversial things that he has been involved in, or denied, or changed his mind about, or refused to answer. But anyway, a COVID issue. And then Senator Ron Johnson has vowed to subpoena agencies like the FDA and CDC and HHS over the COVID vaccine data, adverse data, because Johnson has a role now, and he's going after the government because he's the incoming chairman of the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. He's going to issue subpoenas to the Department of Health, Human Services, Food and Drug, Center for Disease Control, to make them comply with oversight demands and document release. And he told the agencies to preserve their records related to safety, efficacy of vaccines, the cover-up of information, the pressure put on critics of the vaccine, and even their careers were threatened. And he said the Biden administration is refusing to provide these documents, and it impedes congressional oversight. And Johnson lambasted the Biden administration in their what he calls a coordinated effort to obscure vaccine safety data. And he did get some heavily redacted documents. And the pharmaceutical people are covering things up too, like Pfizer, and what they will release or what they're refusing to turn over about
that. And there was a public risk, the risk of myocarditis with the vaccines, and Johnson's letters want unredacted versions of these things. And he said the healthcare agencies will no longer operate without congressional scrutiny. And he said, I've sent public letters to agencies regarding virus origins, early treatment, cover-up of information, censoring of critics. And we're going to get to the bottom of these things because I'm chairman of the Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. And we're telling these agencies, you're going to get subpoenaed if you withhold these documents.
Interestingly enough, the person who has been nominated by Trump to head the NIH, very powerful position as far as funding scientific research is concerned, is a man who found himself being ostracized for some of his opinions concerning the COVID pandemic and the efficacy of the vaccines. And now he's going to be in charge of that agency. And I read it was a fascinating piece about him, and I can't pronounce his name. I apologize. It's one I'm going to have to practice on. I think he's of Indian descent. And it was portraying him as a, solid scientist, physician, and academic. And he more or less expressed a puzzlement as to the death rates that were being cited by Fauci during the early days of the pandemic, and arguing that the data seems to show that there were a ton of people out there who were not being factored into this equation, who were asymptomatic, who had the virus but never got sick. And it would explain the rapid spread of the virus because you had asymptomatic people interacting with others. And that to, put a death rate on there without including them in the equation was misleading. And of course, Fauci and others within the Biden administration, targeted him for ostracization and made it very difficult on him, and he was not awarded grants from the NIH. And he even said, I don't know if that was the reason. I'm not going to, He seems like a very reasonable man, let's put it that way. And he had his career derailed, in essence, over what seemingly would be an innocuous question. How come this isn't included in the data? From what I read, he seems like a person that I would like to have in that position. Let's put it that way. An open-minded individual. And it seems as if he has actually some good ideas about reforming the NIH and perhaps some of the other regulatory agencies dealing with healthcare in this country. Yeah,
but now he's in charge.
Hopefully he'll be appointed.
The people who tried to block him,
Yeah. Okay. Time for a break again. We'll do that. On the foreign affairs front, wowzer. Big news over the weekend. We'll talk about that when we come back on Rochester Today, News Talk 1340, KROC AM and 96.9.
Rochester Today with Andy Brownell and Tom Ostrom on News Talk 1340 KROC AM and 96.9 FM.
We are back with more Rochester Today, Tuesday edition with Tom Ostrom. I'm Andy Brownell, and over the weekend, the government of Syrian dictator and despot Assad crumbled, and he fled to Russia, where he's been offered asylum. And there's so many facets to the fall of the Syrian regime that we could spend a couple hours talking about it, Tom.
Yeah.
Because it's so complex and there's so many unknowns at this point. But the very quick observation I'm going to throw out there before we dive into this is I think you could directly attribute Assad's collapse, his regime's collapse, to the Hamas attack on Israel of October 7th. And the ramifications of that and the responses to it. And the reason that Iran likely was not able to come to Assad's aid was because, this illustrates how weak the Iranian regime has become due to Israel and the U.S.'s response to the Hamas attacks. And also the Russians unable to muster up enough resources to do anything about it because of the situation in the Ukraine is, wow. I mean, in Syria fell just like that. Damascus went in a matter of days to these rebel groups, and there are multiple rebel groups. It's going to be unclear who will be in charge. They have a, I guess, ad hoc committee right now that's in charge of things in Syria. But one of the more interesting aspects of it is the leader of this group of rebel forces is a guy who was ISIS and Al-Qaeda, who cut ties with those terrorist organizations. Who knows what his allegiances actually are, but his actions on the ground during this latest offensive have seemed moderate compared to what we have seen in the Middle East in the past by conquering forces. In the cities that he has taken over on his march to Damascus, his forces have been cordial to the citizens of those communities. Yeah. Businesses reopened and functioned as normal. There was no oppressive crackdown, no assassinations or, I guess, executions on the street is what I meant to say. Whether or not that'll be there long term, I couldn't guess. But like I say, the whole thing is who saw this coming? This is really interesting.
Yeah, and the Syrian rebels that were advancing after Hezbollah was decimated by Israel, and now the Israeli Defense Force has moved soldiers in to have a buffer zone between the Syrian boundary and Israeli troop positions. And as you said, Russia wasn't able to help its ally because it's bogged down in Ukraine. Iran wasn't either. Russia had supported Syria. Breitbart put it this way: Russia has supported Syria since a botched diplomatic effort by President Barack Obama to rid Syria of its chemical weapons led to Putin restoring a Kremlin foothold in the Middle East. And there are Russian naval forces in the Syrian coastal city on the Mediterranean, but the Syrian rebels seem to advance over 2 weeks without resistance.
Yes. And once again, I'm going to go back to the Iranians. They had to have, when they, allegedly, I'm going to, kind of say that sarcastically, funded and supported the Hamas attacks on the Israelis in Gaza. I can't imagine they could have possibly predicted how much misfortune this would have brought their way. They must have completely miscalculated the world's response. Well, maybe not the world's response, the United States and the Israelis' response, because much of the rest of the world is on the other side of this thing, apparently, from statements made by leaders and others. But it has greatly weakened their position in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. You bet. Russian forces are in the Ukraine regions where Russian-speaking populations live, heavily Russian-speaking, and they are pro-Russian. And Putin's troops in those Ukraine provinces have, according to Newsmax, taken Ukrainian children by the hundreds, put them on planes, and flew them into the heart of Russia. They're going to be adopted. They speak Russian anyway, and they're going to be adopted. And some international organizations are concerned about that. Hundreds of children taken to Russia during the Ukraine war. The international court is opposed to Putin doing that. Putin said, we're saving these children, we're bringing them to Russia, and we're having them adopted, and that's what we're going to do, and what we're doing.
Well, very quickly, on the flip side of the coin for Russia, I read a piece about the collapse of the ruble and the impact on the everyday lives of Russian citizens and how difficult their economic situations have become because of the economic sanctions and the effect it's had on their economy. And you wonder how long Putin can hold on to popular support, particularly if Trump ramps up oil production in the United States and cuts off or reduces the revenue from their oil exports, it would be devastating for the Russian economy.
Yeah. Yeah. Russia and China are accused of severing the NATO Baltic Sea communication cables that let the NATO nations coordinate policy and intelligence. And a Chinese war vessel went into the Baltic Sea area, and China assisted with its technology, and huge anchors that were lowered to disturb and destroy the cable system. NATO is very concerned about that. They did it. The Chinese had a carrier there anchored in those waters, and they remained anchored. And so some say Russia did it after those missiles were shot into its own territory and into Russian territory, precision-guided missiles. And so Moscow wanted to disturb Ukrainian war operations and NATO communications with it. And they say Russia and China see this as an opportunity to stall NATO's policies and war machine. And Trump is trying to avoid entanglements, including the Syrian situation. Trump said, we don't belong there. We won't intervene in Syria.
All right. We probably have to go in just a second, but that attack on the fiber optic cable would be part of what they're calling hybrid war operations now.
Yeah.
And part of this hybrid operations is the Chinese hacking capabilities. And the FBI late last week issued a warning for all Americans about texting. Don't text anything that you consider sensitive because guess what? The Chinese have hacked the systems. They're monitoring all of it. I know that was especially aimed at business people with proprietary information and the government officials, but something everybody's got to keep in mind. If you're sharing whatever it is, don't think it's private. Somebody else is watching. But we'll have to talk some more on Thursday, Tom.
Yep.
The clock says we have to run. Awesome talking to you again, and we'll do it again in a couple days. For Rochester Today with Tom Ostrom, I'm Andy Brownell. News Talk 1340, KROC AM at 96.